Hey guys, welcome back to another video. In this video, I thought I'd give you guys an introduction to web development. So for this first video, I will be introducing you guys to HTML. So if you're not familiar with what HTML is, I'm just going to take this opportunity to kind of give you guys an overview of what it is and how you work with it and how exactly it works within a web browser, right? So this is actually going to be a three-part series. This first video is just going to be an intro to HTML. The second video is going to be an intro to CSS. And the third video is going to be an intro to JavaScript. All right. So I'm just going to go ahead here and get started. So you'll notice here on my screen that I have two windows open. On the left, I have VS Code open, which is a pretty popular editor tool that you can use for writing HTML code. You can also use it for other programming reasons or other programming languages. You don't necessarily have to use this just for web development, but I think it's most popularly used for web development. And the one thing that makes it such a great app is that it has extensions that are created by other developers. And so these developers, they submit their extensions to the VS Code marketplace, and then they get approved, and then you can pretty much extend the functionality of VS Code through these extensions. So it makes VS Code even more an even more powerful editing tool to work with, right? So you can get that from the Visual Studio Code website. Just go to Google and type in Visual Studio Code, and it should be like the first link that pops up. Okay, so here in VS Code, in my file explorer, you'll see here that I have an index.html file set up. So when you're working with HTML, you have to have the HTML extension on your file, otherwise it won't render correctly. And index is typically the starting file for any HTML project. So it's kind of like the entryway into your project, I guess you can kind of say. So basically you have index.html, and then if you were to have other pages, you would name them different names, right? You would give them a different naming convention. So index would be your main page, and then if you were to have a contact page, you could have contact.html, you could have about.html, so on and so forth. And then here I have an assets folder. In the assets folder, I have a CSS folder, an images folder, and a JS folder. This is pretty much like a typical setup for web developers. They usually like to kind of tuck everything away into one specific folder. In this case, I have an assets folder, and again, CSS, images, JS. So I'm not really going to be covering these folders in this video. I'm just going to be focusing mainly on the index.html file. So you'll notice here that I already have some code that I've already written here. And in my right window here, this is Google Chrome. Everything that all the code that I have written here is currently being rendered in the web browser, right? So I'm going to explain to you how this is all being rendered. So before I get started here, there's actually a really good website that I would highly recommend you check out. It's w3schools.com, and if you need to look anything up on HTML, this is the go-to site. Any questions you have, or if there's anything else that you want to learn, if you want to learn about more HTML elements, this is the go-to site for referencing. So before I even start talking about HTML, I'm just gonna they give you a really good introduction here on what HTML is on the W3 Schools website. So what is HTML? HTML stands for hypertext markup language. HTML is a standard markup language for creating web pages. HTML describes the structure of a web page. HTML consists of a series of elements, or you can even refer to them as nodes or tags. Tags or elements are pretty interchangeable. Those are the two most commonly used, I guess, words to describe a tag or an element within your HTML code. HTML elements tell the browser how to display the content. HTML elements label pieces of content such as this is a heading, this is a paragraph, this is a link, etc. Right, so this gives you a neat little description here of what HTML is, and then it gives you a simple HTML document setup. So you notice here it has the doc type, it has the opening and closing HTML tags, opening and closing head tags, and then opening and closing body tags. And then if you scroll down a little bit more, it'll explain that example. So the first line here, the doc type. The doc type is a declaration which defines that this document is an HTML5 document. The HTML element is the root element of an HTML page. The head element contains meta information about the HTML page. The title element specifies a title for the HTML page. The body element defines the document's body and is a container for all of the visible contents that appear within a web page. And then there's the H1 element, which defines a heading, and then the paragraph element, which defines a paragraph. Okay, so I'm going to jump back into my example here that I set up, and I'm going to give you a quick overview here of what I have structured. So again, right at the top here in my file, I have the doc type HTML defined, right? So that's the page declaration. Then I have my HTML tag. So if I actually condense some of this code here, you'll see that I have my opening HTML tag and my closing HTML tag. So this is pretty much the main container, which wraps all of our HTML code into the page. So after my HTML tag, I have a head tag defined, right? And then within here, I have some metadata fields, right? So this one defines the character set. This one defines some of the viewport settings. So this one, content device equals device width, initial scale 1.0. So this is good for viewing your page correctly across different devices. Then we have our title tag. Again, the title tag is the kind of like the main title of the HTML document, and it also appears in the web browser tab. So you'll notice here in the in Google Chrome, in the tab, you'll see basic web development intro, which is the title that I'm defining here. And then I also have a link tag that I'm using to import my CSS style sheet. So I do have some styles being applied here through CSS. In particular, this button that's being applied with CSS. And then after that, after our head tag, we have our body tag. So the body tag is basically where all of your HTML markup is going to be placed. And everything that goes in between the body tag is what you see rendering, or is what will get rendered onto the web page. So everything that I have here, that you're seeing here, that I'm highlighting in Google Chrome, this is all content that's being rendered through the code that I defined here in my body tag. So first things first, I have a div element that I have here. This is just a basic wrapper that I like to use to wrap all of my HTML content within. So I made a note here, div tag typically used for structuring content. After that, I have a header element, right? And then I have a nav element, and then I have an article element. So these are like semantic tags, which are useful for search engines. So here I have my header, and then within my header I have an H3 tag, and then basically I'm just displaying a message here, welcome to my webpage, and that's basically what you're seeing over here. After that, within the nav tag, I have some A tags. So these A tags, this is basically just a simple menu that I quickly created. So everything's being structured here, home, services, about, and contact. Then I have an article tag, and then within there I just have some simple text. And then here I just have some general purpose HTML tags. So here we have an A tag again. So an A tag is used for creating links, right? Then I have an image tag. An image tag is used for rendering images. Then I have a UL tag with nested li tags. And this is typically used for rendering text in a bulleted format. So you'll see here in the browser, we have this bulleted list being created or being rendered. Then we have a form tag. Form tag is used for rendering forms. The form tag is a container for labels, input fields, select lists, so on and so forth, right? So I have my opening form tag, my closing form tag. Within there, between that, I have some labels with some input fields. I have a select list, and then I have an input of type file, right? So all of this code here is what you see being rendered here, right? So I have my radio button. Actually, that's not right. That is not radio button. That is an input field. Sorry about that, my mistake. Okay, so here we have an input field. Here we have a select list, yes and no. Then we have a radio button, we have a checkbox, and then we have a file upload field, right? Okay, and then after that, we have a table element, and then within there, nested within the table element, we have a table row. We have a few table rows, and then some table headers, fields, and then the data that's being rendered in between each header field, right? So you'll see here we have a nice table layout, name, position, organization, and then Leo, web developer, Digital Odyssey. So tables are typically used for displaying information in an organized manner. So that is pretty much it, just to kind of get your feet wet with HTML. So again, you can think of HTML as a series of elements that you code within your, within your page or within your document, and then these elements can either contain child nodes or not, or child elements. So again, here we have our nav element, and then within there we have several A tags that we're defining. So these act as child elements of this nav element, right? Same thing for the unordered list element. We have nested li elements. So these are acting as children of the unordered list. Yeah, and this can also be used as an order list. If we change ul to ol, we can make that an order list. So you'll notice in the field now that the bullet points are now actually numbers. Okay, and another thing I should mention is that some elements can actually be self-closing. So for example, you'll notice here the image element. You'll notice that it doesn't have a closing tag on it. So if you look at the A tag here, it does have a closing tag, but the image element does not, because it doesn't require it, right? In this case here, for the A element, we're actually nesting some text within it. Like we need to render some text. So in order for that to happen, we need to have that closing tag there, right? Yeah, and it's very important to define the closing tag when you're working with elements. So you need to become familiar with with each of these elements, and you have to know which ones are which ones have a closing element or a closing tag, and which ones are self-closing. So that's important to keep in mind. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. So that's pretty much it for this video. I just wanted to give you guys that quick overview on HTML. I am going to be posting this code on my website, so you guys have a point of reference. You guys can just kind of take this right off my website and kind of just start playing around with it. But that's pretty much it. I mean, working with HTML is pretty simple. There are like a lot of elements that you're going to have to become familiar with. Like for example, there's also a lot. You also have to learn the attributes that you can assign to elements. So for example, here, if you notice the A tag, I have a target attribute, which is being assigned a value of self, and then I also have a class attribute, which has a value of link. So the class attribute is typically used in conjunction with CSS. So if I were to actually delete this class attribute, you'll notice that the styling on my link has been disabled. And then if I add that back, you'll notice that the styling gets reapplied, right? And then you'll notice here on the image tag, we have an alt attribute. So this is good for kind of giving the image a description. It's also good for SEO purposes. And then what else do we have here? And then here we have our input fields. So our input field, we have an attribute of type, which is defining this field as a text field. And then we have a placeholder attribute, which is just defining some placeholder text. So this is the text that appears within the field itself. So enter email address. And then again, if you look further down here, we have more input fields, and these are actually being defined as a radio. This one is being defined as a checkbox, and this one is being defined as a file, right? And that's what allows us to render each of these fields into different formats, right? So we have the radio button, we have the checkbox, and we have the file field. Yeah, so again, guys, that's pretty much just a quick video. I just wanted to give you guys that overview on HTML. Again, it's not that hard to work with HTML. It's not like a difficult language to learn. You can actually pick it up quite easily. You could probably, like, within a week, you guys should be able to be, creating web pages, no problem, right? But if you guys need a point of reference, I highly recommend the w3schools.com website. Even to this day, I still reference this site myself because there's always new things to learn in HTML. HTML is always being updated and refined, and it just becomes better and better. And then then there's also CSS and JavaScript. There's always new things to learn in CSS and JavaScript as well, and you can learn some of that here. But for the most part, this is going to be a great site just for diving into HTML. And if you guys want to take some, more advanced courses, I would highly recommend Udemy. They have a lot of great courses on there that cover HTML in depth. Yeah, so guys, I hope you guys found this video useful. If you did, feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll try to get the next video out very soon. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.